What's going on, guys? Your boy, your host, George Mackay, back in the Straight Talk Studios, pre-recorded during this COVID-19 time that we have. And man, oh man, do I got a good one. I cannot wait. And I've been a fan for a very long time. I had the pleasure of seeing him in Crossbody in January before everything kind of went haywire and crazy. But I'm honored to bring to Straight Talk Wrestling right now, Speedball Mike Bailey. How are you, my dude?
I'm very well. Thank you for that intro. Very nice. What is that, by the way? Is that a scoreboard behind you?
That is right there. Yeah, I'm a big New York Giants fan, and somebody hooked me up with that a couple of years ago. So it's a scoreboard. It's got the month and the day and the temperature.
Okay, good. Do you use it to keep score of anything?
I use it to keep score of how many times I yell at my PlayStation when I lose. That's pretty much about it, though.
Good.
So, Mike, one of the first questions I always ask everyone, it's kind of my standard go-to, and then it helps the interview flow, is I call it the defining moment. It's that moment in time you remember falling in love with wrestling. Like you knew it was going to be a part of your life for as long as you possibly could. Do you remember that moment?
Yes, I remember that moment very well. It was the first time I saw it when me and my brother were just flipping through the channels on the TV, and we saw Kane trying to set the Brood on fire. And we were like, wow. I was 7 years old. He was 9 or 10. And we're like, wow, this is great. We got to do it. So it took us maybe one or two episodes of Raw to decide, okay, that's it. We're taking our mattresses off our beds and we're going to start giving each other suplexes in our bedroom.
And who won a couple of those early matches? Was it a draw, or did your brother get the upper hand, or did you get the upper hand?
So we were never fooled by wrestling being real or fake. We kind of understood that it was pretty silly already. We mostly just started practicing moves right away, and kind of understood that the winners and losers were predetermined. But if we had fought for real, which we did all the time, my brother kicked my ass because he was 2 years older than me, so quite a bit bigger.
But now, I think it might be a different story, because I've had the pleasure of seeing you fight, and I have to tell you, man, I sat at Crossbody when I saw you in January. I sat 3 rows, center ring, and I could hear those kicks on Holden Pro. I could feel the pain in his eyes, and I had the pleasure of speaking with Frankie the Beast a couple months back, and when I asked him, I was like, who's one of the guys you love to step in the ring with? And you were the first name he came out to, and quote unquote, this is what he said: I love Mike Bailey, but I fucking hate that guy because he hits me so hard that I feel it. I feel it all the way down into the bowels of my soul. Mike Bailey haunts my dreams. That was a quote from Frankie the Beast King.
Oh, wow.
He just had nothing. He had nothing but great things to say about you. And then I actually re-interviewed Holden Pro a couple weeks back, and I asked him about the match with you, because in preparing for hoping to get this interview, which we've now locked down, and he said the next day he was so sore he couldn't even get out of bed, because that's how hard you hit. That's how fantastic of a striker you are in the business. And I have to say this, I've had the pleasure of seeing a lot of indie guys. I love wrestling. I live it. I breathe it. My wife's a huge fan. You met her that night as well. I have 2 small girls.
Yes,
my daughters are the lights of my life. And I told my daughter, my 10-year-old, about you, and her face the whole match, I was describing the whole match in detail, and her face was like this. She was just floored by how incredible you and Holden threw it down that night for the crossbody title. And you are hands down one of the best strikers in the business. I don't give a shit what anybody says. I'll put my stamp on it. Anybody watching this video or listening to this podcast, you want to fight me on it, fight me on it. Mike Bailey is no joke when it comes to striking.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. There's a lot of great compliments kind of slipped in there that I won't get to do a rebuttal, but I can't say best striker in the world, because there's a lot, especially in Japan, there's a lot of very, very competent MMA fighters and kickboxing guys. I do think I have close to the best kicks in pro wrestling, at least. Taekwondo is what I've done. I'm a 4th degree black belt in Taekwondo. So is my brother, by the way. But yeah, no, it's very kick oriented. So I've spent a considerable chunk of my life just practicing kicks. So I'd hope they're good. I'd hope they're pretty good. I mean, I've worked really hard at them. I can only think of a few guys that I consider, they can kick. They can kick really well.
And who might be one or two of those guys on your list that you think are just as competent strikers as yourself?
So, I can think of a few Taekwondo guys spread out across the world. Ender Kara, who is he is Swedish, but he has spent some time in England as well. Yoshiaki Sekai in All Japan has a Taekwondo black belt as well, and I think his kicks are phenomenal. Katsuhiko Nakajima from Noah. A lot of the OWE guys actually can kick very well. I had a match with Gao Jingjia, and his kicks are out of this world.
So when you have the ability, I know I'm putting you on the spot. When you get into the ring with some of these amazing dance partners that you have, and that's what I call it. When you're in the ring and you're telling a story, it is a dance, it is a sequence, and a lot of people don't appreciate the art form that it is. And that's what gets me so frustrated. I love non-ignorant wrestling fans. Oh, it's just guys wrestling around in spandex for a belt. No, it's so much more than that. And if you were to pay attention and pay these guys the respect that they deserve, you would see the art form in its full capacity. And the stories I've been able to watch you tell, thank God for YouTube, because YouTube has put so many of your fantastic matches up there. In preparing the last couple of days for this interview, I rewatched my favorite match of yours all time, next to the one you had at Hold the Pro because I was there and I got to see it live, was you and Kevin Steen from 2010 C4. Your first encounter with Kevin Steen, and you guys lit it up for 12 minutes. The decision did not go your way, but I saw you and him take each other to the extreme. And the name Speedball Mike Bailey, it's well earned because you don't slow down in that ring. I sometimes wonder if you breathe because I don't see it. I just see this flash of lightning, and then I hear a hard, and it's like, damn, where did that come from? I don't know how you do it, but you're damn good at it. So talk to me about, I guess, that from 2010 with Kevin Steen.
So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna answer your question first, and then I'll go off on a long tangent about breathing. But that match with Kevin Steen was my second match in C4 wrestling, I believe. The first one being against Player Uno, which was our first singles match we've had. And that, that was really, really well received. And I think the audience really enjoyed that, and that helped them get behind me for the Kevin match. But yeah, C4 was really one of those places where I'd been wrestling in around Quebec for about 5 years at this point, if this is 2010. So, wow, 10 years ago. Isn't that crazy?
That's insane.
I'd been wrestling for in Quebec for 5 years, and I couldn't say I was good at all. I was trying hard, and I had been giving my best everywhere, but this was a pretty dark period for independent wrestling. I don't know if you were watching then, but keep in mind this is before Twitter and Instagram being, I don't know if they actually existed back then, or if they did, they were completely irrelevant in terms of getting people to come to your wrestling show. Facebook was kind of around, and I guess kind of helped, but it was still difficult. You got most of the people to come to your wrestling show by stapling flyers to telephone poles and hoping people see them and somehow decide to show up. So indie wrestling was difficult, and there were a few places that actually had the budget to bring in people that were, well trained in taking wrestling seriously and could give me as much as advice as I could receive. And so C4 giving me the opportunity to wrestle people like Player Uno, who had been doing loads of Chikara and I think some PWG by that point and a bunch of other things. And Kevin, whom I learned a lot from. And that really opened the door for me to have matches with people that had wrestled internationally and really were professional wrestlers, and I could learn that aspect from them. So that was really helpful. And
your long tangent about breathing, what do you got to say about that?
So It actually goes back to many other points that you made, that were framed into your question. But in terms of wrestling being way more complex than just two guys going out there and fighting, and like it was in the 80s, I guess, and it didn't have that many layers and it wasn't that complex and people were not telling, in America at least. When I say that, I mean only the wrestling that was on TV for people to see and that people would be familiar with, because great wrestling was always happening all over the world. You just had to work a little bit harder to find it back then. But one thing I've been focusing on actively in my matches lately is taking active breaks. So being able to catch my breath without slowing down the action at all, and finding little ways for me to breathe without making it boring to the audience, and kind of integrating that and changing the pacing of my matches. Like in accordance with my cardio, I do a lot of wrestling seminars, and I always say that cardio in itself is barely relevant to professional wrestling when compared to how you pace yourself.
So you would say pace is more important than, I mean, cardio is probably part of it, but pace is the key.
I would say cardio is 10% and pace is 90%.
Wow.
So this I don't know. Have you ever done any combat sports?
I played rugby for about 6 years before I busted my shoulder. That was as close to combat sport as I got.
Right. I'm still going to use my boxing example, but I'm sure you'll be able to understand it with rugby. So in boxing, there's this old, like this stereotype of the 50-year-old boxer who he's in the ring and he just wants to spar with anyone, and he'll do 50 rounds in a row and he won't get out of breath for a second. And he's just kind of there, and he's just a staple at every gym, and you can just go and spar with him, whatever. But he's pretty great, but he never gets tired, ever, because he's been doing this for so long, and he has the muscle memory, and he knows how to breathe when he's boxing and stay relaxed, and how to actually take breaks, how to switch in between, keeping your opponent away with your jab, and then knowing that, okay, now it's time to turn it up. Oh, now I'm getting tired. Time to slow it down. I'm sure it's the same with rugby. You could put a triathlete in a boxing ring, and as soon as he saw a punch come to his face, he would close his eyes, tense up, stop breathing, and he would be tired within 30 seconds just because he doesn't know how to pace himself, which is the exact same thing with pro wrestling. You can be a triathlete. You can have the best cardio in the world. If you don't know how to pace yourself, that's all going to be useless. So the reason I'm saying this, by the way, is just I don't want to break the illusion of pro wrestling. I think the suspension of disbelief is a big part of it, and it has to feel real when you're watching it, even though you know it's fake. And I don't want people to I still want it to be a bit like magic, in that I don't want everyone to know all the tricks, but I am fine with letting people know how it works, just so they can appreciate the complexity of it, and how that 25-minute match with Holden had a lot of complexities and a lot of thought process that went into making that match the way it is, and maximize every moment and make it as good as possible, when we could very easily have went, hey, let's just go out there and slap the hell out of each other for 25 minutes and it'll be fine, which wrestling was for a long time. But now we're a level where you need to put thought behind everything. You need to tell a story, and you need to make every cool move mean as much as possible by carefully placing the pieces where they fit the best.
You are your wrestling IQ is off the charts, and everything you say is everything I understand and appreciate about the business. And now you've actually enlightened me a little bit more, because pace does make so much sense. And now thinking back to what you just said, looking back fondly at that match, which is, like I said, one of my favorites with you and with Holden, there was so many layers, and it was because of the pace. You guys told a story that I think stands the test of time. And there's nothing bad I could say about that match, except when this all ends over, I want you to come back and we have to have a part 2. There is so much more story to tell, Mike. It's not over. It can't be over. So if Ben Ormond is listening to this, he has to bring it back.
I'm definitely going to be back. I love Ben. I love working for Crossbody. Every time I go, it's a pleasure. Ben is one of the nicest guys that I've ever seen in the business. The first time I saw his setup, and after he opened his gym, I told him like how much I believed in what he was doing and how he was doing it. And I think like schools and promotions like his are exactly what pro wrestling needs right now. I was going to say something else. It just slipped my mind. The reason I'm able to like tell such complex stories out there is, again, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've been carefully breaking down and paying attention to what I've been doing, and like there is not like none of this is anything. It's something that learning helps, but it's something you really have to do and tweak and make small changes to matches over 15 years in order to be able to apply to pro wrestling matches. So like as far as having like a high wrestling IQ, I've been doing this for 15 years. I have a lot of matches. Like the experience pays off if you pay attention to it and you're mindful about what you're doing in a wrestling ring.
You are, and one of the things I love about you is that you mix styles so well. And you mix styles. I mean, your martial arts background helps in the wrestling ring, your pacing, your IQ, everything is there. And I love it when you meet a wrestler that's not just a wrestler. Okay, yeah, I'm a naturally trained wrestler. That's great. But I think when you add styles to it and you add layers, it adds more of a lifespan to you, because you can put together things in the ring that some other people can. If you're just a wrestler, you're taught, all the things that make wrestling fantastic. And depending on your style, you could be a ground game guy, you could be a power guy, you could be a high flyer, you can do all those things. But if you mishmash styles like yourself, it actually adds a whole nother layer when you're telling a story. Do you agree with that?
That's exactly right. So the moment that my wrestling kind of switched to the next level, and the biggest jump in my progress as a professional wrestler was when I decided I'm not going to be a professional wrestler. I'm going to be a Taekwondo guy in a professional wrestling match. And I decided I would absolutely, instead of just trying to learn, do pro wrestling like you're trained to be in a very, very base level, but just focus on what I'm good at, which is acrobatics and Taekwondo and all that, then my wrestling took a huge leap. I know Matt Riddle told me the same thing. Like he did years of mixed martial arts, as we probably know, and then he learned the basics of pro wrestling, and then he tried to wrestle like a pro wrestler for a while, and he realized that it was much better if he just fought like a fighter within a pro wrestling match, and then things would work out better for him.
Well, it's actually funny that you mentioned Matt Riddle, because one of my other favorite matches of yours is with Matt Riddle back in 2017 at OTT. You guys had, oh man, Mike, there's not a match of yours I don't like. You are literally hands down one of my favorite guys. And you've been all over the place. You've wrestled all over the world. I mean, Germany, Mexico, Japan, the seminars that you've hosted. One of the things I love is that I followed you very early on Facebook. We became friends a couple of years ago, but you have a lot of friends on Facebook. We became friends a few years ago, and I've watched your seminars. I've watched all the pictures you do, all the knowledge that you've imparted on people. And that's what I love about pro wrestling, because it's not about trying to be the biggest dog in the yard or trying to be the guy that gets all the attention or gets booked for the best matches. It's about learning, honing, and then giving back. And you do that in spades, my man. You do that in spades.
Correct. And I do it completely selfishly. It's not out of pure generosity that I do it. It's because I realize that, especially in Canada, or even more specifically Quebec, in places that are just a tiny bit isolated, everyone benefits from being better. So there's only a certain potential for pro wrestling shows, or how good they're going to be, right? And I'm usually, not to toot my own horn or whatever, but in Quebec, I'm pretty much at the top of that. I'm one of the highest paid guys in terms of how much money you can actually get for a booking for an independent show. But if the whole show becomes better, then from the bottom up, I end up benefiting from that. Also, by everyone understanding wrestling better, by everyone becoming a better opponent for me potentially, by if I'm on the main event of a show and I was able to give a seminar before the show and that made the 7 matches before mine just a little bit better, it's just going to be just a little bit easier for me to do my job.
I concur with that completely. And you know what?
Not only that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Not only that, but I love teaching. I enjoy teaching. So doing seminars for me is a pleasure, not a chore. I've been teaching Taekwondo for a lot longer than I've been teaching wrestling. And that's been very good. But I mean, I encourage all wrestlers who were well learned or well trained to give seminars and pass on their learnings. Like, even if you don't enjoy teaching, it'll benefit you in the long run.
I 100% agree. I love that give me back mentality. You touched on earlier we talked about 2010 being a decade ago and how crazy that is. I was 26. I just had my daughter and my whole life was in front of me. Now I'm 36. I got 2 kids and a mortgage. Life is just passing me by, but I wouldn't change it for the minute, especially with my little girls. But you mentioned social media and how it wasn't really relevant then, but it is now. So with all the positives about social media, there's a lot of negative. It gives everybody out there a voice. And good or bad, love or hate it, everyone's opinion is out there for the world to see. With all the good that social media does in promoting independent wrestling now, especially putting matches up there, giving independent promotions a platform to share their work, share their stories. As much as there are a ton of good comments, there's a ton of bad comments, and then there's a ton of comments you scratch your head around. I mean, with everyone being entitled to their opinion, what's your take on social media? I mean, we get the positives from it, but when the negative aspects come through, how do you handle that? Because there may be a young wrestler that's just breaking into the business, that's learning, and this could be an important part of knowledge to pass on to them.
Yeah, so this is something I think a lot about, and I think I realize I'm a professional wrestler. That's what I do, and I have a lot of thoughts about professional wrestling. And people follow me for a reason. I have things that I'm very passionate about, and I feel like I should say those things. I also have a lot of jokes that I like to make, and I like to interact with my friends, and that's all fine. So I think that's what people want to hear from me, and I think you have to really find out what people want to hear from you, and really, like, if something doesn't concern you but is important, like, for example, there's a lot of inequalities that Twitter was very helpful in raising awareness towards. And I think there's a lot of people that are fantastic at using Twitter for that purpose. And I think you should help those people. You should share their tweets, but you should recognize that you don't need to have an opinion on absolutely everything, especially things you don't know about. It's always better to go and research and educate yourself about something than to start tweeting about it before you know. Or if not, if it's something that concerns you, for example, if you want to be an ally to whatever minority, then unless you're part of that minority, you should probably just educate yourself on it or help and share and follow people that do. And that will be more beneficial for the cause than you as someone who is not really concerned giving your opinion, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely.
As a general rule, focus on your strengths as well. If you're a professional wrestler, tweet about professional wrestling. If you're, tweet about things you like, tweet about things you care about, but keep it to that. You don't have to tweet your opinion about everything. In terms of advice for wrestlers on social media, tweet about your wrestling. This is the basics for every pro wrestler that starts out with a Twitter account. Before you go trying to go viral or trying to be part of whatever, discourse is happening on Twitter that you don't have a very strong opinion on because you haven't researched it that much. Tweet about your matches, tweet about your wrestling, tweet a photo every day of what you do if like wrestling training is a part of it, and tweet a picture of you at wrestling training if you go to the gym every day. Tweet a photo at the gym every day. Every time you have a match, tweet, hey, I'm about to have this match. This is where you can find it. And after the match, tweet about your experience from the match. And that's how I think wrestlers starting out should treat their social media.
100% agree. I mean, I look at your Twitter following, you have tens of thousands. I look at my Twitter following, I have 350, but that's only because I've been around for 2 years and my podcast is still growing. So, you know, it is what it is, but I do the same thing. I keep my tweets on my podcast strictly to my podcast about who I've interviewed, who I want to interview. And actually, I tweeted a few weeks ago before I reached out to you on Twitter again. And I said, you know, Speedball Mike Bailey's on my list. And then I thought, you know what, I'm going to message him again. And I did, and man, how easy was it? It was super easy to get in contact with you, and I'm having a blast. We're about halfway through this thing, but I'm having a fantastic time because you're a great conversationalist, and you're imparting so much wisdom. I've learned so much today, and that's what I love about having stories and conversations with wrestlers and anyone in this business is because I'm learning so much every day about the business that I love, things that I didn't even fully understand or comprehend, especially about pacing. I thought cardio was everything. You open my eyes to that cardio is 10%, but pace is 90. And that's huge for me. And at 36 years old, I've learned something today. Check mark off the list completely.
Well, thank you.
So in terms of when the world gets back to normal, when we get through this crisis together, when we all rise above it, humanity as a whole, and wrestling shows open up again. And then we get to see all of you guys entertain us. And I can't wait for those days. Is there anybody on the indie scene that you kind of have your eyes on that you can't wait? Like when the world comes back to normal, you can't wait to be like, all right, it's ready. It's go time. I got this one. I'm going to get booked with this guy and we're going to make it happen. Is there anybody you have your eye on that you really want to get into the ring with?
Wow. That's a really hard question to answer unless you've already thought out your answer in advance.
That's why I love these spur of the moment interviews, because I ask the tough questions.
So no, honestly, I don't think there's anyone right now that I would like to face. However, my girlfriend, as you know, is Veda Scott, who currently lives in America, and borders being closed, we haven't been able to see each other in a long time and might not be for another few months. However, last time she was in Canada, we had some tag matches that were some of the most fun I've ever had in a wrestling ring, just teaming with her. And the way our ideas work and our plans for a match, like how copacetic we are on that, was really fun. So I can't really think of anyone I would like to wrestle, but all I know is when the border opens up again between Canada and America, I would love to do more tag matches with Veda.
Veda is a talent, man. Oh, she is such an amazing talent, like yourself, and it's no wonder that you two found each other in this crazy business. And it must be hard right now. And I don't mean to get too personal, but not being able to see her. And I know she posts, because I follow her on Instagram as well. I know she's posted a few times about how much she misses you. That must be the one thing you guys are looking forward to the most when the borders open. You're probably just going to spend a week together and you know, live it up as a couple, because that's got to be the hardest point. But, you know, in terms of my question, developing relationships on the road and starting a relationship on the road in the wrestling business, is that a challenging thing when you can't always go to the same promotions together? Or is it kind of one of those situations where absence makes the heart grow fonder? So you don't see each other for a few weeks because you may be on different tours or different stretches, but then you guys come back together. How does that work with the relationship on the road in terms of wrestling?
So it hasn't been difficult. Like, I wouldn't say it's been hard, or it's been a headache, or it's been a chore, or it's required a lot more planning. And like, we really had to think ahead in how we schedule our trips and take bookings. And in terms of the countries we've been together, like, we've taken long stretches together in England, in Japan, in Canada, in Germany, and we've wrestled together in a bunch of other places in Europe. And like those are all things that require me to be a lot more to have a lot more initiative about and to decide this is what I want to do, this is where I'm going to go. Where if I was alone, I maybe wouldn't be so motivated to do them. But because like we get to be together if we do those things, it's like it's a lot more motivating, and it's made like my career as an indie wrestler a lot easier in terms of making those trips, having a partner with which to make them, and just be able to, like, for example, like just to be able to use both our contacts rather than just the one, and like figure out all the travel logistics together has made it a lot easier. But this is in terms of just a relationship, and I know this is good advice because it's not mine. I heard it on a podcast from an expert, and I'm just repeating it. The most important thing for a relationship is just to be creative and to figure out ways to keep things fresh and interesting, and not just kind of sit back and let things happen. That's been especially important for us because the way our relationship has worked is basically we spend like a month or two together in one place, and then we'll be a few weeks or a month or two apart. And just to, like, again, it's not a challenge. It's usually the best part of my day, but figuring out ways to be together during that time has been very important. And it's something that I'm glad I learned to do. Like, and it's been paying off now, as silly as that seems, the fact that we're used to being in a long distance relationship has helped in that this is not a shock for as many couples right now who are in the same situation as we are, except they've never had to face that.
Absolutely. I've never had to face that. Luckily enough, I met my wife 18 when I busted my shoulder. My rugby career was over. A month later, I met her, and it was never a regret. As soon as I met her, I knew. It's one of those situations, where you look at someone, she paid attention to me, which I don't know how I got her. I married well above my quota because I'm not the best looking individual. I can admit that. My wife is an absolute stunner and one of the most genuine people in the world. And we've been together for 18 years, happily married for going on to 12. And every day I learn something new. And that's the greatest part about being married, is that I learn something new every day that I didn't know before.
So the story of how you guys met is roughly the same as Hank and Peggy Hill.
Yes. Yes, it is. So I guess you could say I'm king of New York. I'm the king of the hill, but I'm not. I don't sell propane. I do work in transport, but I don't sell propane. But yeah, you know what? She's everything. She's super special, and I wouldn't trade her for the world. And I'm so happy that I locked her down when I did, because it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So for that guy out there, if he's watching, who busted my shoulder in the last game in rugby, thank you. I appreciate it. So you mentioned going all over the world and being able to go to all these different places and experience the different cultures. And every fan base in every country has got their own flavor, their own style. Canada, we're loud, we're respectful. America, it's kind of 50-50 depending on the city that you're in. Germany, Japan, they all have their own niche crowds. Out of all the crowds you've wrestled in front of and all the people that have got to see you work, what is the one place that you can remember the crowd just being over the top? Maybe it's back home in Quebec or wherever can you remember a crowd where just everything was over the top electric? I mean, every crowd is probably electric, but there had to have been one place or one country where the crowds were just that little bit more. They kind of kicked it up and made you want to work even harder.
So my favorite crowds are easily in Japan. And it's not how you might think at all. They're not loud. They're not chanting. Like most of the time, and this is why I love them so much, they're paying attention. They're quiet, not because they're not enjoying themselves, but because they're trying to follow along and understand what is happening with the match, which makes it a lot more rewarding for you to, again, like try hard and do things that make sense. And that's why long-term storytelling in Japan is so important, because people follow the promotions a lot more. And like the same fans for DDT, for example, I know the same 50 fans approximately go to every single show, no matter where it is in Japan, they'll be there. So it's a lot more easier to like focus on storytelling and things you do in the long term makes more sense and mean a lot more, which is the complete opposite of Mexico, where I wrestled in front of arenas with thousands of people in them, with absolutely no one was paying attention to what was happening in the ring unless there's like a dive going on, or unless we're in the middle of a big, spot where everyone is jumping off the top rope. No one cares. That's just because how it is culturally over there. The attitude is not, oh, I'm a huge fan of professional wrestling, I can't wait to see those guys. Is, hey, the wrestling's in town, let's go and have a beer there. Which is still fun, by the way. Some of the, like, wrestling in Mexico is one of the, like, funnest things you can do. But I prefer to see wrestling as something complex, and I like to take all the opportunities I can to make it have as many layers and be as deep as possible. So Japan really allows you to do that more than any other place in the world.
I haven't been to a Japan show. I haven't been over there yet, but I have plans to go in the near future because I would love to see how the other half lives. Every time I've talked to someone who's been over there, anytime I can share stories with any wrestler that's been over there, they all pretty much have the same thing to say, that it is electric. And I guess 2 more final questions, and then we'll wrap it up. In terms of your career thus far, and like you said, 15 years, and kudos to you on 15 years, because it's not easy to be in this business for 15 years and make it work as well as you have. Is there any plateaus in the near future that you're looking to hit to elevate your career? I actually stole this from Holden Pro. I give him credit all the time, but I've now made it my own. He called it level up moments. In a video game where you get to that next level and then you rise above. That's what he called it. Breaking through your glass ceiling, whatever cliche you want to use. Is there any level up moments that we can expect from Speedball Mike Bailey once the world gets back to normal? Or maybe even something he might be working on now?
So no, that's a hard question to answer, because I think I would be remiss as a professional wrestler to not be seeking and trying to make the most out of every opportunity that I can. So I'm always looking for whatever that next level is constantly. I know that next year is when I would, in theory, be admissible to go back to the United States. So I'm hoping I can make something happen with that. But aside from that, in the near future, I don't really have any concrete goals that I'm looking at. I'm just going to try to make the best out of everything.
Wow. I know that when you get everything lifted, because you got stopped at the border and everything happened with kind of the visas and stuff like that. So just in case people don't think there's some kind of controversy, that is exactly what happened. There was just simple visa issues. When you are able to go back to the States, you're going to light it up. And I can't wait to see those matches on YouTube, because I won't be able to follow you everywhere in the States. But wherever I can get you at a show in the States, I will be there cheering my head off as a proud Canadian, supporting a fellow Canadian. But also, I know you're going to tear it up and you're going to light it up, and people are going to remember Speedball Mike Bailey. That's for sure. Because if they don't know who you are after this interview, they definitely will. Because I have been repping you for a long time. I still stare at I actually have it right next to me here, is the autograph with you and Veda that you guys signed for me at the Crossbody show. I actually tweeted it the next day. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. So it's actually one of my favorite autographs that I have in my studio, and I'm proud to have it on the wall. And now I can officially check mark it off that I've interviewed one half. I just got to get with Veda. So maybe you can hook that up and help a brother out. We can get with Veda.
Yeah, okay. Of course, perfect. I can do that.
I appreciate that, sir. And my final question, if there's any young fan listening to this interview, because you're a great teacher and your wrestling IQ and your wisdom is just fantastic, and this interview has been absolutely incredible. I can't thank you enough. Before I ask my final question, I do want to let you know you are officially a member of the Straight Talk family. You have my Skype ID. I have yours. Anytime you want to come back on the show, I would absolutely love to have you. You are a talent and a pleasure to speak to. But in terms of my final question, if there's any advice you can give to a young fan that's thinking about getting into this business, a young, male or female, doesn't matter, looking to become a wrestler and get in this business, what wisdom would you impart onto them?
Yes. So this being a multi-step process, first, assuming you can't start training for pro wrestling yet, go find ideally a sport or just a discipline that you enjoy and focus on that. Whether it's, some things get a little bit closer to pro wrestling and some things get a little bit further. Like martial arts, I think, are great and probably ideal. dance and gymnastics work fantastically. If you want to go and do like improv and like learn that side of things, that's fantastic as well. Wrestling becomes so much easier when you come into it with a background. Going on another long tangent here, but we all know Georges St-Pierre, the former UFC champion who's from Montreal. I was listening to an interview with his coach, and he was talking about how MMA works and how in MMA you have to do like 5 different things at once. And it's very difficult to teach an adult when he comes in and says, hey, get me ready for a fight. It's very hard to teach him all those 5 things. It's better if they have like some components, maybe 3, and then you put those together and kind of make up for the rest. I think professional wrestling is a little bit that way. You can't really start training for professional wrestling as a child. So what you don't want to do is put yourself in a position where as soon as you start training for pro wrestling, you need to learn all the different components at the same time. One of which being learning how to learn, right? Because the way I see it, learning a new skill is also a skill, and the way you take in information and the way you apply it and the way you're able to break things down, and just things like learning to go to training consistently is something that you need to first learn before you're able to do it. Learning how to, more sports, but for everything else, learning how to take care of your body, learning how to, again, pace yourself in terms of how you train. Those are all things that if you want to be a professional wrestler, now that you're young or before you go into professional wrestling, you should master or as close to it as possible, and then come to pro wrestling with already a skill set that you can then add on top of your professional wrestling base.
I couldn't have asked for a better answer to end a fantastic interview. Speedball Mike Bailey, thank you again. You would go enjoy the rest of your Saturday as best as we can in these times. And I can't wait to speak to you again at a show or have you back on the show, whatever works for you. Sir, you are an absolute pleasure, an amazing talent. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, my friend.
All right, stay safe, and we will talk soon.
Yes, please.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next week for another episode on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. Also follow us on Facebook at Straight Talk Wrestling, on Instagram at Straight Talk Wrestling, and on Twitter at _Straight Talk. And for all our merchandise, you can search us on ProWrestlingTees.com.